Welcome back to another episode of Expats in Ukraine with your host, me, Corey. Today, my guest is going to be Iggy, or Ignatius, if you want to be official. He is a volunteer, a photojournalist, and a combat medic. So, Iggy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, well, Ignatius is really for my mum when she's angry with me. Most people call me Iggy. And yeah, I'm a 28-year-old jack of all trades, master of none in Ukraine. Do a bit of everything, as Corey just introduced. Thanks for having me, Corey.
Oh, no problem, man. It's great having you. Yeah, you kind of have an interesting backstory. Like before we were filming, I asked you, like, where are you from? Like, how do you feel yourself? And you were stumped,
Sure.
right? Because you're from the UK, but your mom is like Russian. Like, can you
Yeah.
tell me about this?
Yeah, I was born in the UK in Windsor, but I grew up for the most part in Russia because my mum's Russian. And I lived till I was 15 or 16 in Moscow, coming back to the UK for holidays and stuff like that, camps. When I moved back to the UK for college and uni and stuff like that. Shout out King's College London. I gotta plug my uni, right?
Plug it, man.
Yeah, and then I lived in Switzerland, lived in Asia for a while, lived in Mexico. Kind of came back full circle to Moscow when the COVID started, because I thought I'll come home, be with my mum for a bit. And that's, lasted a while, if you guys remember. I was what's a good year and a half, 2 years. Yeah, and then war in Ukraine started, and yeah, here we are.
Yeah, but since your father is like from the UK, your mom is like Russian.
Yeah.
Why are you connected with Ukraine?
Well, I don't have any direct connection, apart from the fact that my mom's been here since 2014.
In Ukraine?
Yeah, well, coming and going, just doing different humanitarian work. And my mom's a journalist. So yeah, doing different stories on humanitarian work since 2014. And my brother's lived here for maybe 4 or 5 years now. So we kind of have a family connection, so to say, but no direct links. Yeah.
Okay. And you said you were living in Moscow right before the invasion? Like, what was it like there? Like, all my guests, they're like, so far removed from Russia.
Yeah.
And you actually were there during the invasion. What was it like?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it depends it depends really what you value in life. If you're kind of, in terms of just, maybe your basic needs, Moscow's a great city to live. You can have everything at any time. But if you're looking for a bit, maybe kind of, I don't know how exactly to put it, but if you have like a social conscience and you're kind of worried maybe about the world around you, it's not the best place because it's a very oppressive environment. Yeah, all the shops work 24/7 and the taxi service are great and the internet is super fast. But at the same time, if you try and say anything against the government, yeah, you're looking at a whole world of trouble. So unfortunately, a bunch of my friends were in prison, and I was always very lucky because I have a British passport. And if I'd go to any protest, I could always just, blag my way out of it, literally just by showing a passport. That's happened a couple times where I was about to be arrested, and as soon as they see my passport,
And you just show the passport and
Yeah,
start
and they
speaking
just-
English?
yeah,
Like,
they
what are
just
you
don't do
doing,
it.
officer?
Yeah, exactly. But it's all, it's a mental intimidation game. I remember one time, I think this was 2021, and this was when Navalny came back to Russia, and there was a bunch of protests to that. And I was out in the streets with my mom and my girlfriend at the time, and we were just walking around, and it was crazy to see because there was so much police everywhere you went. And I remember we were walking down this street, one of the main streets in the city, and there was maybe 50, 60 policemen in front of us, kind of walking in the opposite direction, walking like in the direction we were going, right? Like a swarm of them. And they're all dressed in black, and so they're called cosmonauts in Russian because they have these helmets and they look very intimidating with the body armor. And we're walking behind them, and then all of a sudden they turn around and they're walking straight at us. Like this bunch of police guys.
Wow.
It's a pretty intimidating situation. And before I know it, I'm surrounded by a bunch of them, and my mom and my girlfriend are on the other side. And they start like harassing me and like, what's going on?
But
Blah,
were you
blah.
attending the protest, or were you just walking the street? Or...
Well, officially we were just walking.
Ah, okay.
But like really that's what, so the whole idea, because it's so difficult to kind of protest in Russia, is like you just go for walks kind of, right? And the problem is anyone outside is a target for the police. If you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, you get arrested basically. Like they really crack down on any social discontent, on any type of dissent.
Yeah.
Very strict on it. Yeah, and all of a sudden they surrounded me and they're like asking me questions, and I'm playing like the dumb foreigner card. Like I speak fluent Russian, but I don't
I
know.
want to see my passport again?
Yeah, exactly. So they're like, documents, like documents.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's going on? They're like, passport. I'm like, show them the passport. And I remember this was when COVID was still going on, so I had a mask. And he's like, take a mask off. And I take off the mask and I smile at the policeman. And at that stage, he just gives me my passport back and that's it.
Yeah.
Because as soon as like you had this, as soon as he realized he wasn't intimidating me, he wasn't interested. You know, they just moved on to the next guys. But, you know, if I was just like a Russian guy, like, you know, they'd have arrested me and probably given me like 2 weeks just for, you know, being in the streets at the wrong time.
Yeah, like maybe when they pulled down your mask, since you smiled, they're like, this guy can't be from Russia because he's smiling.
That's as well, you know. In general, yeah, Eastern European countries are not the most
exactly.
smiling
Too much
ones.
teeth in this guy. Move along.
That's a very weird contrast, isn't it? Especially if you live in the UK. I don't know how it is in the States. I've only been
Everyone's
a couple
smiling
times.
at your face. Yeah.
But see, that's the thing. Like a smile in like kind of Western European culture, it's like a level 0 in communication. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's just a smile. Whereas if you start moving kind of further east, it's actually like, why are you smiling at me?
Yeah.
Is it? Am
It
I
becomes
funny?
like aggressive.
It is like, am I a joke? Like, is there something wrong with my face? You know. So it's a very different type of mentality. So yeah, Moscow was it's a tough place to live in if you really.
Were you there February 24th, 2022?
Yeah,
You were there.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
what was like exactly like that day? What was going on?
Well, right before the war started, I remember speaking to my brother who was living in Kiev, and I was trying to persuade him to evacuate. I was like, hey, you know, there's going to be a war, because all the information, it was pretty clear something was happening. You know, when they got like 250,000 soldiers on the border, and they started bringing up the blood banks, and then all the foreign embassies were evacuated, and I was like, well, you know, it's gonna happen. And I was speaking to my brother, and my brother was just saying, no, like, this is my country now, this is where I live, I'm not gonna leave. So he was kind of my first failed evacuation, because afterwards I started evacuating civilians. I was speaking to my mom, and my mom was like, maybe there will be a war, maybe there won't. And then I remember when it actually started, and I was texting my brother, and he was like, yeah, everything's okay. Like, you know, obviously it's not that easy in Kiev, but we're managing and stuff. And we were sitting the next day, we just didn't really know what to do with my mom. And we're just right there in our kitchen in our apartment. We're just like, yeah, we'll go to Ukraine. And it took us a couple days to sort out all the documents my mom needed, and 1 week later we were in Ukraine, pretty much, maybe 10 days
So it was like basically
later.
your whole immediate family, right?
Yeah, essentially. And my dad's in England, but we're not in touch too much. So,
Yeah. Okay. Wow. And so you just came to Ukraine because of like your brother, really, right? And you didn't want to live in Russia because your brother was in Kiev. It sounds like maybe.
I wouldn't say it was entirely because of my brother. Like, obviously, it did play a role that he was there, but it was also because I think primarily because of my mom and her relation to Ukraine. Since 2014, she's been super active here, and she's very pro-Ukrainian, which isn't very common, especially amongst Russian journalists. So she was always, since 2014, she was coming to Ukraine, helping people here, trying to raise awareness. She was participating in the prisoner exchanges, and it was always a very big part of her life. It was pretty clear that, like, if we stay around, she's going to get arrested, because she'd already had run-ins with the law. She'd been arrested. She was put in jail a couple times, and like, you know, there'd been a lot of issues.
And what is the process like? Say they put a protester in jail, they just like document the situation and then they let him out a few days later. Like, what is the deal here?
It depends.
They blacklist him from stuff. I don't know.
They changed the laws after the start of the war, so they criminalized the protest. It used to be administrative offenses where you get like 7 days, 14 days.
Okay.
Whereas now I think if you do it twice, you're looking at like serious jail time, like years plus. But in the past, I can just tell you about what happened to my mom the last time. And she went, there was a society in Russia called Memorial, which they preserve the memory of people who were repressed by the Soviet state. And they try and raise awareness on the issue and say that, hey, you know, the Soviets weren't really good guys. Like, this is what they did to their own people. You know, maybe we shouldn't glorify them. And obviously the Russian state doesn't like that, because they want to paint this image of success and strength for the Soviet Union, which might not be a full reflection of reality, but, you know, it is what it is. And my mom was outside, and I remember her calling me, and she was just saying, oh, I'm going to this protest. And I was like, yeah, okay, you know, because usually what happens, she goes, maybe there'll be some problems with the police, but like they'll take you in the police car and then they'll let you go, you know, after. And then my mom calls me and she's like, yeah, we've been arrested. Can you come to a police station and bring me some clothes because they want to keep me here? And I'm like, oh, well, this is something new.
Oh, wow.
And this was a Friday evening. And then I get there And they're like, yeah, we're going to keep your mom till Monday because that's when the court is going to be. And she's looking at like 30 days in prison or like a 4,000 euro fine. And I'm like, for what? For standing in the street with a poster. Like that's the offense. And the poster just said that like, protect memorial or like don't touch memorial, this organization, which just deals with memory of people. The way they did it afterwards is they created this scenario around her protest where they just grabbed a bunch of people on the streets and they said, hey, this was like a big organized protest of different people. And it didn't matter if those people didn't have any posters or if they weren't there for the same reason. They just made us a group and they made like my mom the group leader just because.
Yeah.
And I remember I get to the station, to the police station, and this lady on the entrance, this policewoman, she starts telling me, hey, like, look, it's not us. Like, we're not the bad guys, you know. We just have a job to do. Like, and I'm like,
we're just following orders. Whoever heard that before?
Right? And I'm like, no, like, you are the bad guys. Like, you're implementing this. And she's like, yeah, you understand, but it is what it is. I'm like, no, I don't understand. Like what? And then she's like, look, everything is fine. Like, we're taking care of you, mum. But you understand we took away her glasses. And I'm like, why? My mom's like a 60-year-old woman, you know, she's not like a, you know, a big dude and whatever. And she's like, oh, well, and she starts showing me her wrists like that. And I'm like, what are you implying here? Like, my mom's gonna slit her wrists in like what is going on here, right?
Yeah.
And then I walk through past that lady to the guy in the, I don't know what you call it, the reception, should we say. And he tells me, hey, no, actually, like, we gave her back the glasses. And then the lady from the entrance, she's saying, hey, so we're not such animals as you think. And I'm like, you literally just told me you took away her glasses. How can you like play this both ways? Like, it doesn't work. And I remember the guy comes out who's supposed to look through the things and he's looking at the stuff and it's like my mom's underwear and stuff like that. And he's like examining it closely in case there's, I don't know, narcotics. I don't know what he was expecting to see. So he looks through it. He's like, okay, everything is fine. And he asked me, do you want to go see your mum? And I'm like, this is dodgy. Like, why is he being nice to me? You know, you don't trust the police, like, a priori. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So we go into the police station, and he has, like, a key card. He takes me inside one room, and then there's a corridor with a bunch of, like, kind of cells / interrogation rooms. And he opens the first one with a key card, and it's, like, all dark inside. And I'm like, nah, I'm not going in there. He's like, okay, do you want to go in the next one? So he opens the second one, and I'm like, fine. And I go inside and I remember I'm standing, I'm thinking, damn, they're going to lock me up right now. Like, this is what's going to happen. 100%.
Wow.
They just lured me in here, you know, and I'm like, I'm going to be in shit. So when he leaves, like, I'm standing there with my foot in the door, just in case they try to slam the door. So at least I put up a fight, you know.
Yeah.
And then he comes back with my mom. And it's like, yeah, I felt this relief that at least she's all fine. And then, yeah, the weekend, it was pretty intense because I started writing all these petitions to say that, like, she was illegally arrested. And we gathered a bunch of votes from, like, the intelligentsia. I'm not sure if you know what the intelligentsia, it's like a social class in the Soviet Union of kind of free thinkers who were historically repressed by the state, you know, sent to concentration camps and so on and so forth. And obviously the Russian state, the modern state, doesn't like the intelligentsia, but it still kind of has like a little say in things. Maybe not so much anymore, especially with a full-scale invasion. So I went to a bunch of people and we got like some letters from these people signed saying that, hey, my mum is like a upstanding citizen, you don't need to arrest her, like, why are you even holding her in prison for 3 days on the basis of what? The fact that, you know, their official reason was that the court can only happen on Monday and it's Friday, so they have to hold her till Monday, even though, like, she's a well-known person in Russia. Like, she's a public figure, you know. She's not going to run away anywhere. Long story short, we get to the court, and they don't want to let me in as like just to be there to see how the court's ongoing. So the lawyer, I don't know the word you say. He admits me as the second lawyer in my mom's defense. So then we're in the court. It's the judge, the police, me, my mom's lawyer, and my mom. And my lawyer gives a little speech, and then I stand up and I give a little speech, also like in defense of my mom. So I guess at like the age of 24 with no law degree, I ended up being my mom's lawyer in court, which was a pretty surreal experience. All I said was, I was just like, guys, there's no offense committed here. My mom was standing in the street with a poster, and now you're talking about imprisoning her for 30 days over that, or fining her a bunch of money. Like, the only harm that's been done here is to my mom for her being kept in prison for 3 days, in jail for 3 days over literally nothing. And in the end, I don't know if it was the social pressure. I don't know if it was like the amount of media outside. I don't know what it was, but the judge, she gave her a fine, which in that scenario was the best possible outcome, because once you get to the court, you're getting convicted. There's like a 99.9 conviction rate in Russia.
Yeah.
You're not getting off scot-free. Yeah, and then I remember when we got home, and it was just this massive sense of relief. And this was only 30 days. Like, 30 days, isn't great, but it's not years.
Yeah.
But I just remember how I felt like, yeah, I just felt so happy that my mom was home and like, yeah, she was okay in that moment. And I began to really empathize with a lot of people who are sitting in prison for trumped up offenses, because a couple of our family friends, they got arrested for different stuff and they did years in prison in Russia. And my mom's always been active in supporting Ukrainians who were arrested, and she writes like letters to them in prison and sends food and stuff like that and parcels to the Ukrainian soldiers who were arrested since 2014, because it's been a long process. They always grab different people. And
well, your mom sounds like a really good woman, and there's like a lot of Ukrainians I met, like they're very proud. This full-scale invasion made them kind of turn their back on Russia and the culture, the people, regardless. So there's like this phrase they say, there's no such thing as a good Russian. What would you say to that?
It's not really my business to comment.
Yeah.
I think actions speak louder than anything else I can. People can make their own conclusions.
Yeah.
know.
Do you blame them for saying that?
Not really, no. It's understandable.
Okay,
Like, yeah. It is what it is.
Oh, totally. Like I was telling a previous guest that, there's like this phrase, and I don't know if I necessarily believe it. Like I have a friend, she's Russian. I met her many years ago in Kyiv. She moved to the US shortly afterward. And then right when the invasion happened, she messaged me. She was making sure like everything was fine. She was sharing my stories. She asked how she can help. She was donating money. She was helping with goods. Like when I was sending her like some links, and she was like, changing her profile picture to the Ukrainian flag. And I'm like, wow, this person is actually active and trying to help, even though they're Russian. And I wanted to ask you this question, because I was thinking she probably can't even go back to her own country now, because obviously with all the support she has given to like Ukraine and maybe the Ukrainian military, then she would be kind of a traitor.
Sure.
Like treason. So you can't go back to Russia either then?
Yeah, no way.
No way. Never.
Well, unless I want to be arrested, I could
you can
probably
go
make it to the border and, then straight to prison. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's so wild to me about how people like in Russia can like live this kind of nightmare. I don't know. It just seems like they're so oppressed. But then you see people like, I guess they're like bots, or maybe they're just stupid, but they're in such support of Russia. Like it's the best country. It's the freest country, the greatest country.
So I think you really have to differentiate here. Yes, there are some people who are indeed like pro-Ukrainian, and frankly, I feel awful for those people because they can't do anything. Anything they do will lead them to prison. You get arrested. There was a 17-year-old girl who got arrested, and she's sent to prison for 3 years for writing "No to War" graffiti on a building, and you get 3 years in prison for that. And anything you do, it won't lead to anything apart from your arrest. But at the same time, can you really compare that to being bombed, to being shelled, to living in an active war zone? I'm not sure you can. So I think you have to be careful with, over advocating for those people as well. And so one thing I can say, I grew up in Moscow, I grew up in London, I grew up all over the place, but I never really identified with being Russian, just because of the way I was brought up and the culture in my family. My mum, she identifies as Russian fully, and she feels awful every day. She feels like this is her fault, even though the way I look at it, she's done everything in her powers since, not even 2014, since the 80s, to see some social change in Russia, but she feels like she's failed, and it's a massive burden on her conscience. So obviously for people like that, it's tough, and there are good people, but then when you look at the majority, does that really apply? I'm not so sure.
Well, yeah, of course. But then there's like a phrase in English, like complacency is complicity. If you're complacent, you're complicit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
and I agree with that.
Yeah. But anyway, I feel like we're getting. Once I found out that you kind of lived in Moscow during the the full scale invasion, which was like right before we started filming. I was super interested in this, and I
Sure.
wanted to get more info. So, anyways, now I want to talk about like your work, man, because this is kind of super important to like the country, and you're a combat medic.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into this? Because you're also a photojournalist, humanitarian, volunteer. Tell me about how you got into being a combat medic for Ukraine, for this
Well,
volunteer legion or whatever it is.
maybe I'll start with the beginning.
Oh, start from the beginning.
When we came over.
Yeah.
Because this was March 2022. It's a long time.
And you had no problems entering Ukraine.
No, I got a British passport.
Oh, okay.
and
And your mom had no problems.
well, my mom's a well-known person in Ukraine. She's not just a random person to show up.
Okay,
So,
okay,
no,
okay.
she didn't have any problems.
Okay.
Luckily enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, we came. This was, I think, the 8th of March or 9th of March, 2022, and we
It's
went.
like Women's Day, right?
Yeah, it is international.
Wow.
Well, although there's controversy in Ukraine
that's
about
why they
that
let her
now,
in.
I think.
Happy Women's Day.
Yeah, I think there's like some issues with that. Anyway, I don't get involved in that kind of stuff, Yeah, and we got to Ukraine, and we got to Kiev, and Kiev was it was a strange place to be back then, because I'd been to Kiev a bunch of times before the full-scale invasion, since 2014, before 2014 as well, as a matter of fact, and it was like really eerie because you go for air raid sirens and there's nearly no one outside, and the only people you see are guys like the police or the military, and there's checkpoints everywhere.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to like get the timeline in order. So this is when Irpin and Bucha were being occupied,
Yes.
or was okay.
Yeah, at the very start.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have a plan of what's like I was going to be doing. I had a background in humanitarian work. I used to work for the International Committee of the Red Cross in communications, and I had an interest to it. I'd been to Ukraine. I'd been to the Donbass in 2015, 2016 with some humanitarian aid. So I had an idea of what war is like, but it was an idea and a perception which maybe wasn't in line with reality all the time. And we started just doing some small time, I can speak about myself, some small time volunteering stuff, and some people on my social media saw and they started donating some money. So it was just piecemeal things, drive an old lady from A to B, pick up some supplies and deliver them there where people don't have any food and stuff like that. And I was kind of deciding what to do. And I had an interest always in photojournalism and documenting things. I had like a blog, you could say. And obviously my mother being a journalist probably also influenced that. And I got offered to work with some French guys who needed like a field producer, a fixer on the ground. So we started shooting news with them, and one thing led to another. And we were in Irpin the day it got liberated, or the day after. And it was intense. There was a lot of bodies.
Do you know Chris Ochakon?
Yeah, I do know Chris.
Okay, he was like on the cast before, and he was saying he was there like after it was liberated as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy to know him. Yeah, he's a good guy.
Chris is a
Interesting to
very
talk
good
to,
guy. Yeah. We were just in Zhytomyr region together. We were driving to see some friends of ours. So yeah, really nice dude.
Yeah,
Go
actually,
check out his work.
Yeah, I might
Brilliant
meet him
photographer.
this weekend while I'm here in Kyiv.
Yeah, really nice guy.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to Irpin, and I remember we went to Irpin, and I wasn't really prepared for that. I don't think anyone is prepared the first time they see it, because I remember when I was in the Donbass in 2015/16, there was a lot of destruction and there was a lot of sorrow and sadness, but it wasn't like piles of bodies in the streets, But I do remember one thing from back then that struck with me. There was an old woman who we were delivering some food, and I could see her coming from her house, and it was difficult for her to walk. So I took the food and I went over to her place and I put it on the table, and she sat down and she just said, "Oh, thank you so much, son. Thank you so much. I just hope the next missile kills me." And I was like 20 years old or 21. Wow. And I came outside, I sat on the steps and I just started crying. I couldn't keep it together how a person they're so desperate and in such sadness and sorrow from their lives that this is how they feel. But again, I wasn't experiencing those things myself. I was an outsider. I came and left. Whereas when I went to Irpin, I was already kind of living in much more of a war zone, so to say. Even though I wasn't living in Irpin, I was living in Kyiv, but still, it was pretty dangerous here, relatively dangerous here. And I remember we met a local pastor and we were going around, and there was a lot of dead people everywhere. And we took some photos, we did a news story about it, and then Bucha came out, and Yeah, that was pretty awful. But it's not the bodies that struck with me. It was what the people said, because you couldn't make that up. How terrified they were. A lot of
Yeah.
people refused to be on film because they were so scared the Russians would come back, and yeah, they'd kill them basically for it.
So you probably talked to a lot of people like from Bucha and Irpin at this time. What is something that most people aren't aware of that happens there?
Well, if in 2024 you're still not aware of it, I I don't know, man. It
Like
was
something
they
that's like
were,
maybe like lesser known that maybe the public doesn't really know, but maybe Ukrainians know.
I don't know. I think it's like it's pretty well known by now. It's difficult for me to say. I will say, like, I mean, the Russian soldiers, they were just terrorizing everything there. They were really like out for blood in those specific areas. I don't know why there exactly. I don't know. Maybe it was, the specific commanders. Maybe it was the specific soldiers. I don't think there's any rational explanation for the amount of cruelty they inflicted. Um, Maybe it was because they didn't expect to be stopped there,
Yeah.
and they just had this outpouring like, "Oh, now we're gonna kill the civilians we see," pretty much. I don't think there's any rational explanation for it. You maybe as a human being you wanna explain these kind of things, and you wanna think that there is a reason for it, but I think it's just cruelty and injustice for the sake of it.
Yeah.
That's what it
Well,
was.
psychopaths, man. Yeah. No
Yeah.
empathy.
But I remember one story that struck with me was from Borodyanka. This was a little town also in Kiev region, and we went there. And when the Russians were there, they got to the town and they met some resistance. They pulled back, and then they had the planes come in and they just bombed the shit out of these houses, of civilian houses. And you could just see, so there's like an apartment block, and in the middle where they're supposed to be part of a block, there's just a gaping hole, with like nothing
Wow.
there because they just would drop a bomb on it. And we were speaking to some of the locals there, and I remember what struck with me the most was when one of the men there was saying how they were sitting there under the occupation and they could see all the bodies, and the Russians wouldn't let them take the bodies away until they started to stink. And that's when they were like, okay, now you can get rid of them. So they only showed some sense of humanity, you could say,
Yeah.
when it suited them. Like, they didn't need to do that, Okay, they killed their own. They could have let the people take the bodies away. No, they wanted to show, they wanted to demonstrate this is what happens.
These are sick people, man.
Yeah, that's pretty messed up.
Yeah, I mean, it's so sick. So I know we got kind of sidetracked with Bucha and Irpin. It's very interesting to talk about. I hope more people understand kind of the gravity and the reality that was going on there. But yeah, so you were doing photojournalism, and then when did you kind of switch to being a combat medic, or maybe there's more to we'll get there. Okay. I just try to keep us on track,
Well, we'll get back on it. Don't worry. Yeah, so we were doing this, and there was a photo I took. There was a woman who was killed, and she had a keychain of the European Union next to her hand, and published that photo on my Instagram. Yeah, it got big, so to say. And after that, I kind of realized that, like, I probably won't do anything big as a photojournalist in this war than that one shot. I just had this inner conviction that I think I need to change something. I want to do something more. And I think all the stories I had heard and seen from these people, I don't know how to put it, but I realized that there should be more to be done for these people than just tell their stories.
Yeah.
There is more, and there should be more. Because it's great to tell a story, but maybe it gets published, maybe it doesn't. Maybe someone sees a photo, maybe they don't. Whereas that person is right in front of you. You can help him right now in that situation, and you can see the direct impact. And I just started feeling that maybe that's a more positive and more meaningful way to impact the situation around me. And at the time, my brother, he was in Severodonetsk. He was doing some volunteering there. And actually, this was exactly 2 years ago, on the 8th of May, I remember. Because a lot of people, he asked us to help him with some aid, and we were going to deliver some humanitarian aid. And we drove 2 buses in, and several of the drivers didn't want to go because it was 8th of May, Russian Victory Day. They were scared there was going to be an assault, and there was an assault, but thankfully we got out all right. And that was the first time when I was really like in an active war zone, like with shelling around me. And it was pretty crazy because they had an oil refinery plant and it got blown up, and all the dust from the ground had got mixed in with the fumes, and it looked like Afghanistan pretty much. Like everything was yellow. You were just in this yellow hellscape. And that's when I evacuated the first people from my evacuation experience. We met his family and we persuaded them to leave, to go with my brother because he was in charge of the evacuations there. And I got out of there and I realized that, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to evacuate civilians.
So when it comes to like evacuation, you have a van, you go, you find people, put them in a van and just like take them? Is this more or less?
Very roughly.
Roughly,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. It depends where you go. So because it's the evacuation started picking up. I worked with a couple different guys, and then I got my own team together. Social media really helped. Social media played a massive role because we started recording it. People started supporting us. Money was a huge issue because we needed vehicles, we needed fuel, we needed to repair the vehicles constantly, and it all started picking up. Essentially, I had a team of guys, and what we would do, we would go to places on the front line, and we would talk to the people and try to convince them that, hey, we're the good guys. We're not going to kidnap you. We're not going to take away your kids. We're just going to take you to a safe place. We won't leave you in a railway station, at a railway station. We are going to help you with housing. And I'm still in touch with a lot of the people we evacuated. And I did the evacuations went on for a long time, more than a year. We did Solidar, Seversk, Bakhmut. Bakhmut, we did a lot of work and up till the very end, up till April, basically, before it fell. Yeah, and Chasiv Yar as well. And then the evacuation started drying up, because the front line got more or less stable, and you're going to the same people for the 6th, 7th time.
Yeah, but isn't Chasiv Yar kind of new when it comes to like the front, or has it always been?
It's always been on the front line.
All of a sudden, like it's all over the news now.
Yeah.
I didn't see it on the news like a month ago, but now Chasiv Yar is like everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been on the front line now.
Oh, okay.
It's getting shelled and killed. Since the Russians took Bakhmut, the next town after Bakhmut is Chasiv Yar. It's maybe 7 kilometers, 5-7 kilometers from Bakhmut. So it's the next point. And all the Ukrainian soldiers who were stationed in Bakhmut, they would have like a reserve point in Chasiv Yar. So it was a hot zone. It was an area which the Russians were always out to get. And we were working a lot in Chasiv Yar, and then the evacuations were just drying up. And the guys who were working with me, they started exploring different ventures because, I didn't have work for like 6 people. There was nothing for us to do anymore on the scale that we were used to. We did some water projects. We set up I'm pretty proud of it. We set up a very nice project with supplying water to Chasiv Yar, to the whole city. But unfortunately, our idea was that we would bring in the water, we would set up these water points all across the city, we would coordinate with our volunteers, with the administration. The civilians could always come to get water when they wanted, and they'd see that, hey, we are the good guys, we're helping you, maybe you should leave with us. But that didn't work. They just came, they got the water, and then they were like, yeah, thanks, we're staying here. So it got to the point where there's no more evacuations to be done. And one of the guys who I'd been working with on my team, he had joined Hospitallers, the volunteer medical battalion. And I was always interested in tactical medicine, and I'd taken some courses. So I thought, hey, maybe this is an avenue I should explore. Yeah, and then just one thing led to another. I did the training, I joined the battalion, I did some rotations. And then I joined a different unit, and I've been with them the past 6-8 months probably.
Oh, wow. So you've been to the front line like many times, it sounds like. So I know I asked you about like what is like, some lesser known things about like, Bucha or whatever, but what are some lesser known things about the front line? That people aren't aware of what is going on there like every day. Sure, there's shelling, sure there's deaths, sure there's someone retreating, someone on the offensive. But what is something that is like not talked about that you kind of want to bring up maybe?
I think
maybe some sort of injuries, some weapons that are being used. I don't know, whatever.
I think one thing that is important for a lot of people to understand, especially Westerners, is that, there's a tendency to separate soldiers and civilians, right? But a lot of those soldiers, they were civilians 5 minutes before the war started. They weren't professional, they weren't in the professional military. They had to take up arms to defend their country. So there's really not that much of a difference between them, a part of some level of preparation and equipment they have. Really, it's the same people deep down. And the things they're suffering, it's awful. The amounts of injuries and amputations, the vast majority of injuries you see is all shrapnel. You don't really see that much direct contact with, bullet wounds. It's all shrapnel. And now with the war as it is today, it's all FPV drones. It's terrifying to be outside. It's really scary.
This is what Chris was saying as well. He was saying it's so terrifying now with the drones. He's like, I won't even go that close to the front line because these drones scare the hell out of him, he said.
Yeah, because, before with artillery, I don't know how to put it, but it was kind of fun in a way. Like it was like a roulette. You know, maybe
Yeah.
they hit you, maybe they don't, maybe they get it close. It's down to luck.
Yeah.
With FPVs, it's not down to luck. Anywhere you go on the front line,
Being watched,
they
yeah.
will have eyes on you,
Yeah.
and there's a high chance they will hit you with an FPV drone if you're moving in a vehicle. It just changed the whole dynamic of the battlefield.
Yeah. And so when you say like FPV, so I saw like a lot of these videos where it's like this drone drop, like these grenade drops. Is it still a thing? I know
Of course.
FPVs are kind of
Yeah.
more common now, it seems like.
It's a bit different. There's different guys operate first-person view drones and
Yeah.
the ones that drop. It's a slightly different set of skills, but yeah, both are popular.
But it's like-
Obviously, just with the FPVs, you're more precise because
Yeah.
you're literally maneuvering the drone. You can fly it anywhere you want, and you can hit the target directly. Whereas if you're throwing a bomb from a drone, you might hit the target, you might not hit the target. Wind comes into play, so on and so forth.
And I'm like kind of when it comes to these drones, like these lethal drones, I'm quite illiterate in it. So if a FPV drone, like, do they have like is there a different size of like the grenade or the explosion that is on it, or I don't
Yeah, it
even know how
depends
to
on the
say.
drone.
Yeah, okay, so there's like variation. So if
Sure.
one of these average FPV drones like hits like someone, it just takes them out or disables them.
You're dead.
You're
if that
dead,
hits
okay.
you. Yeah, you're not making it out. Like if it hits anywhere within like 5 meters of you, you're probably gonna die from injuries on the spot because they have a bunch of shrapnel.
Yeah, of
and,
course.
If it hits your vehicle, I mean, I know a bunch of guys when they got hit by FPV drones and they survived, and that's just luck
Mm-hmm.
because I know some guys who didn't make it out, unfortunately.
Yeah, and yeah, I want to ask about like cluster bombs, cluster munitions. There's like a lot of that on the front line.
Sure.
Yeah, like I live in Odessa.
Mhm.
So the other day, like last week or something like this, they had this cluster bomb went
Yeah.
off like in Odessa, and I was there like the day after just to kind of check out like kind of the damage, and it's so sick, man. Like that whole area is like shrapnel, like holes like in the asphalt, broken windows everywhere. And there was like where those people died, you could still see like the blood. I don't know, it was like disgusting, man. And like cluster munitions, they're so
Yeah.
deadly and they're so lethal.
And they're so imprecise as well.
Yeah,
There's just somewhere in that area it'll hit.
yeah, it's I don't know.
It's a very
I-
dirty way to fight a war, but
Well, especially if you aim it at like civilian areas, like in Odessa.
yeah,
It's like this
that's
is
pretty messed up, eh?
yeah, it's really messed
Doesn't
up.
even
man.
make the news now. Like
Yeah.
in the States, I mean, or whatever. It's just like, yeah, maybe a byline somewhere,
You know,
on the
it's-
4th page or something like that.
no, it's so sick. But so yeah, I want to talk about now, like your daily life, like as a medic. Can you just kind of go into like how do you usually do this? You set up somewhere and then you get ready to go to the front line. You're the front line for like a week or two. You come back, get rotated. Like what's it like?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the type of mission you're on. Usually, I can't go into too much.
Yeah,
like,
don't go into
specific
details, but yeah.
But yeah, like it depends on which line you're working on. If you work on the first line, you're working with a group of guys. You'll be there. Like your first role is always to be like in the infantry. So maybe you are protecting you're still in the infantry, but you just have a bit more medical skills than them. And then like the second line, you'll be working on the evac, which is what I do. And you'll come and you'll collect the guys who have been injured and who have been pulled out a little bit further, maybe 1 click behind the line, 2 kilometers behind the line, and then you'll take them to. It really depends. The ideal setup is the wounded gets evacuated to a casevac, a casualty evacuation vehicle, which is maybe going to be very lightly armored. And there are going to be some guys there with a decent set of medical skills where they can try and keep them alive, which is my role. And then the next stage is going to be a medevac, which is going to be more like an ambulance style with maybe bloods, whole bloods, plasma, and just a bigger set of equipment. And then the next point will be a stabilization point where there's going to be actual doctors, with kind of degrees in medicine, working on these guys, and then they get taken to a hospital, and that's the ideal chain. Often that doesn't work that way,
Yeah.
Shit goes wrong.
Well, of
It
course.
very often does.
And when it comes to kind of like the supplies for medics, like how is everything right now? I mean, also you brought up blood and plasma. Like, how important is this? And is there like a shortage of it? Do people need to donate more?
Well, it's more complicated than just people donating blood. It's not really an issue of whole blood availability. It's an issue of skills.
Yeah, I'm ignorant on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Excuse me, but yeah, go ahead and explain, man.
It's really an issue of skills and frameworks, which have to be adapted and which unfortunately take a long time, because we know that the number one way of death prevention in combat casualty is whole blood transfusion. Like if you have a massive bleed, a massive hemorrhage, which is the most likely way someone will die on the battlefield, I think it's more than 70% of the deaths are from massive bleeding. The best way to stop that or to prevent that, to prevent a person going into shock from blood loss, is to give them blood. But it's difficult because you have to preserve blood in a special way. You have to be skilled in transfusing the blood, and actually, my friends at Pulse, the guys whose shirt I'm wearing, they're running a project on blood right now where they're trying to educate more doctors, more combat medics in Ukraine on the way to do it. And they're trying to change the framework to go with the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Defense to make it more accepted. It's a slow process. It's been going on for a while, and hopefully they get it off the ground. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and also I noticed like lately, especially, there's been a lot of casualties like on the Russian side. Obviously, Ukraine doesn't report it, and that's probably for the better. So I've noticed like these last few days, like 1,300, 1,200, 1,100, like Russian casualties, according to the stats that I see. Um, is the war kind of like ramping up right now? Are there some major offensives going on, like from the Russian side, or is they using different weapons? Like, is there anything you can tell us here?
Look, I can't really comment on stuff like that because someone puts up one number, someone else puts up a different number. I don't know. I know that they're always assaulting right now. Like
Yeah.
we're defending and they're assaulting, and that's what it comes down to. Obviously, when the Russians assault, they're going to have more casualties. The same as if
Well, of
we're
course,
assaulting,
yeah.
we'll have more casualties. That's the nature of warfare. They are trying very hard to take Chasiv Yar, and let's hope they don't succeed because it's going to be bad for Ukraine if they do. And they're advancing from a different direction from Avdiivka, and they're making gains, and it's a difficult situation. But hopefully now with the US bill finally being passed, the flow of munitions is going to increase, and it's a big moral boost because soldiers, they feel that it's so mentally exhausting, and when you get a little bit of hope from somewhere, it really helps. That's what I can say. It's really mentally difficult a lot of the time.
Well, yeah, I can. It's been delayed for so long, and I'm so ashamed of my country people, But I guess something happened, and Mike Johnson. Are you familiar with American politics? Yeah, something happened, and Mike Johnson just changed his stance, and he decided to put the bill up for a vote. And I can imagine, like, the people like on the front line, because, yeah, I heard it was getting dire. And this is kind of one of the conspiracies or what people are talking about on why he decided to switch his stance, because he had Mike Johnson had some intelligence brief saying, like, you know what, stuff could go bad really fast if they don't get this aid.
Yeah, well, it was so overdue.
Yeah.
How many months did that take?
Since November, this is when they brought the bill that was passed in one of the house, and they brought the bill up, and he didn't want to make a vote on it. Yeah, it's so bad. I'm so ashamed of my country people, and I've been talking to the last few guests about Russian propaganda. In the U.S., it's strong. Yeah, we have like the MAGA crowd, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of my guests, saying so many bad things about her. I was like hilarious the way he was saying it. But anyways, when it comes to kind of Russian propaganda, do you guys feel it in the UK? I know Boris Johnson. People in Ukraine love Boris Johnson, but people in the UK, they weren't really too fond of him. How is like Russian propaganda?
Boris Johnson, I don't want to get too deep into UK politics. UK politics are a mess, much like the States, politics most places.
But the UK politics affects Ukraine because they're a big contributor to...
No, I mean, the UK is very pro-Ukrainian.
Yeah.
Unlike maybe some European countries where, it's like, maybe it's ambiguous. Maybe the Russians aren't that bad. Like in Italy, for example, I know there's a big lobby which is pro-Russian.
Yeah.
And it's weird because a lot of those people are actually quite intelligent people from, kind of culture backgrounds. And you see the stuff they're putting out and the views they're advocating. And it does surprise me. In the UK, it's really not like that. Yeah.
So you don't have like a MAGA of the UK, like Make England Great Again? You don't have that?
No, but you have to consider that, since Salisbury, when 2 UK citizens got killed and one was nearly killed by a Russian botched operation, the UK has been very strong on anti-Russian sentiments, and I can understand it completely. Like, what the hell? You have foreign operatives working in your country, assassinating your citizens with lethal poison. Like, what's going on here?
This happened several times, though, right? It wasn't. Yeah, in the UK.
Yeah, in the UK, it happens a couple times, and all over the world in general. I don't know if you saw recently the Czech Republic, they just published a statement on an explosion that happened 3 years ago, and they've concluded that it's the same people. I think there was an explosion next to a military base, and it was the same guys who did the explosion as the guys who did the assassination in the UK, the assassination attempt, which failed, luckily.
I mean, and Russians, they got their hands like in everything. I don't know.
It's crazy.
No, it's so crazy to me. And I don't know, the Russian propaganda is like so strong. And also, have you heard about the news about, in the Baltic countries, they're starting to put GPS jammers like on the planes. So would you consider this like an act of war maybe? Or is this something that they can just get away with and there's no consequences?
Look, I think you have to understand that Russians have been meddling in European politics and world politics for a long, long time. This isn't something that started just now. They've always had that.
But do you think it's because there's no repercussions? There's like a slap on the wrist, don't do that, bad boy?
I think a lot of I think what Putin has exploited massively is that he sees a weakness on the other side. He's like, those guys are in an electoral democracy. I don't have that issue. I got all the votes all the time whenever I need them, right? Whereas those guys, they're going to be replaced. Maybe I don't like him. In 4 years, there's going to be a new guy. He's going to need votes. I'm going to ramp up the pressure. Prices go up. People can't pay for their bills. We play on that, right?
Yeah.
And it's no secret that they sponsor alternative parties, with fringe views. They'll give them money. Le Pen has been linked with taking money from Russia. Le Pen's very big in France now.
Yeah.
She might win the next election. Who knows? Like, she's been directly linked to having donations from the Russian government.
It's Macron's last term, right?
I think he has to check. I'm not that into French politics. I don't know if he can stay on another time or not. So I have no idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a big thing, and what they just try and do, they just try and destabilize the situation because it works in their advantage. They can exploit it. The way any propaganda works in general, they don't need to give you the truth in any way. They just need to make you doubt the truth, right? Yeah. They just need 1% of chance. So they'll put up 50 different versions of what happened, and maybe one of those versions, it sticks with you, and you think, maybe it might be like that. Who knows? And that's where they get you. As soon as you start doubting the truth.
Yeah, and this is actually what Chris was saying as well. He's like, they're just planting seeds of doubt. He was saying like, maybe you read an article years ago that there's like some Nazis in Ukraine. And then when Putin says one of the reasons why he invaded because of Nazis in Ukraine, then something clicks. Like, I read an article before about Nazis in Ukraine, so it must be true.
100%, right?
Yeah, and this is basically what it is, just planting the seeds.
Just plant a seed. But I also think one thing that maybe especially Westerners, they don't always appreciate is that, the world doesn't end with Western Europe and America. China, India, they're huge players. As long as Russia has them on their side, India not so much, but India isn't opposed to Russia. They're buying so many goods from them. Russia can keep doing this for a long time. And I don't see that changing anytime soon, unfortunately. It's good for China as well, what's happening. Like, the US is tied up in this, the whole of Europe is tied up in it. They benefit from the situation being unstable because they can show instead, hey, look how good we have it here. That's why we need a strong regime so we don't have, that mess like over there.
Yeah, and what is the end game here for Russia? They just take all of Ukraine and then they stop for a bit?
It's like when you're in so deep, you can't get out.
Cost fallacy kind of thing?
I think so. I think at this stage. But also, with the amount of control that they have over society, the Russian government and Russian states, they can put out any version of events and say, well, this is what we were doing. Let's say, I don't know, maybe, God forbid, Ukraine decides to accept that Crimea is Russian and Russians take it. I'm not saying that's going to be a scenario, just as an example. The Russians say, hey, well, look, they've accepted it. That's fine. It was all worth it. We've had hundreds of thousands of soldiers die, but it's okay because we got this. And it doesn't matter what this is, because they can sell you any story. Well, if you being the average Russian citizen.
Yeah, and do you trust like Russia with any sort of like peace agreements?
No.
Like, so
I don't trust the Russian government with anything, and I don't think anyone should.
Okay, and so say if there was
proved themselves time and time again to be a bunch of mobsters. It's all they do. They just manipulate countries around them and states around them, and they bend them to their will, and they get away with it. Like, how did they even get away with Crimea in 2014? How did they have the Olympics after that? How did they have a World Cup after that? How did so many countries let this happen? And I think Westerners need to be aware of that as well, that they're in part complicit, because they had no issue with that. You know, no one did much. Your elected governments didn't do much about the situation when, you know, you were like, the US was a guarantor of the Budapest Memorandum.
Yeah.
You know, when Ukraine gave up their nuclear arms. If Ukraine had its nuclear weapons now, Russia wouldn't be doing this, you know? So there is a certain level of responsibility people around the world have to take for this as well.
And there was like no retaliation, you know, to Russia besides light sanctions for the invasion of Georgia or the invasion of Crimea, occupation of Crimea. And basically it's just like kicking the can down the road. So they didn't do anything in Crimea, kicked it down the road. They didn't, now they're not doing anything for like sure they're giving a lot of money, they're putting like harsher sanctions, but in the end of the day, if Russia's still attacking and they're going on offensives, is it really affecting them that much?
You have to realize as well, when we talk about a lot of money, a lot of this money is going straight back into the US economy.
Well, of course,
you know, 60 billion for Ukraine. How much of that is going straight into arms manufacturing, which creates jobs and stimulates the economy in the US?
Yeah, I saw it's like 80 or 90% is going back into the US economy, and the rest, the small amount is just cash in hand, you know?
So, you know, it's difficult to say what the outcome will be. Obviously, you know, I hope that Ukraine is going to come to a victory, whatever that victory may be. But until the world realizes that this is not a regime with which you can make any sort of agreement and count on it lasting, and you can't just pass this down to the next election because you don't want, you know, you're scared about losing your votes. You can't keep doing this. These are people's lives at stakes. Like, Ukraine isn't just fighting for itself. It's fighting essentially, like, I lived in Russia. I've seen what the state is. You know, my friends were in prison there. My family's been affected. I've seen it firsthand. It's not a good place. You don't want the world to be like Russia. If they come out on top, that sends the trajectory of the world in just a downward spiral. What values and what example do we show to future generations and the world after us if we let this happen? I don't know. Well, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing this.
Yeah, and no, it's very honorable of you, man. It takes a lot of bravery to do that. No respect, like a lot of respect. But when it comes to, because the reason why the West or the US or the allies don't want to get involved is the N-word, like nukes. So Russia, for example, Russia is losing the Ukraine's going on offensive. Russia is retreating back to kind of the borders, and all of a sudden Crimea is lost. Russia threatens with nukes. How do you feel about this?
I'm not going to make any geopolitical predictions of.
Yeah, I'm doing like if my grandma had wheels, she'd be bicycle kind of situation. But
I don't think history allows for ifs and buts and maybes. You know, we have absolutes. We know what is happening. We don't know what might happen. We can't play out reality and essentially play with people's lives on the basis of what if that happens. We have a concrete situation. People in Ukraine are paying a very heavy price for the West in action. And I think also, it's hard to say, but I think a lot of Western actors are benefiting from this situation as well. Because, hey, they get to test a bunch of their weapons. They get to keep Ukraine right where they want it. The Ukrainian soldiers are dying. Ukrainian civilians are dying. What about their citizens? Their citizens aren't suffering. On the other hand, Russia is getting weaker. Like, even though Russia can sustain this for a long time, it is a strain. Who's the main enemy of the United States historically? It's Russia/Soviet Union, right? Yeah. So does the Soviet Union benefit from this? Yeah, they're making an investment into the Russians getting weaker without provoking them too much into a direct confrontation. So if you want to be a cynic about the world and look at it cynically, you could say that there is a certain interest in things dragging on like this for as long as possible. And unfortunately, as the years go on and I spend more in Ukraine, I become more and more cynical. So you think it's going to be a long war of attrition, I guess. It's been 2 years. A long war already, eh?
Yeah, it's been 2 years already. Yeah. But I mean, you lived in Russia a long time. How long do you think the Russian people can stand for? Like, I don't know, what is it? I know the casualty count, it could be different, but I saw like casualties, was it 300,000-400,000? Something like this?
Well, there's a lot of people in Russia, you know, there's 140.
But where do you think they would draw the line, or do you think there would be no line ever?
I don't think I will draw the line.
They'll just be like, okay, there's like five of
Society
us
has
left.
accepted it. Society has accepted this, right?
Okay.
It's like a social contract of terms, a really fucked up one, but that's the one it is. You know, the state says we protect you from the Nazis, which is why your brother, your son, or you have to go fight. Sorry. Okay, well, we're fighting the Nazis. You know.
Yeah.
They might not be Nazis, but it's easier we believe in that than we believe in the alternative. That actually we fucked up our own country for so many years. But also like.
But they're having a demographic problem in Russia.
Yeah, they had for a long time,
and they're making it like a lot worse. Do they not think about like the future? Who's gonna work these jobs to support the older generation when they retire? I don't know.
When you say they, who exactly do you mean? The grandma living in a village in the middle of nowhere, her son, you know, who doesn't really have a bright future ahead of him. Of course, yes, there are in the major cities there is discontent. There has been from the start, but you have to realize the security apparatus is so strong. I think every 8th male in Russia is in the security, is in some version of the police, you know, be that National Guard, police, military, etc. All those people directly benefit from this situation, right? They're getting paid to enforce, you know, the state's vision of society. So while there is the example with my mother in the poster, why do they care about that? That might inspire other people. That's why they crack down on it.
Yeah.
They don't want anyone to believe that there is a possibility of anything else. And at some point, people stop. Let's look at North Korea. Do we expect the North Koreans to rise up against their totalitarian regime because they're sending nukes? They're promising to send nukes to South Korea. No, we don't. We don't have that expectation.
Yeah, but like you said right now, you know, your mom, like why they put her in jail because it could inspire other people.
Yeah.
And this to me just sums up the reason why they kind of are invading Ukraine, because Ukraine was starting to be prosperous. I've been living here since 2015, and the tech scene was growing. A lot of startup companies were coming from here. Grammarly, Preply, and it was I don't know. It was so special. It was like watching Silicon Valley, from the very early years, and people were living very well, especially like in the cities. And I guess if Russian people start to see like the contrast of their life versus their neighbor's life, which is supposed to be a lot worse than them, like a little brother, if they start to see that, then they're going to start questioning their own governments, and they can't let that happen. So it's basically like putting your mom in jail, putting Ukraine in war. They can't inspire people.
They're so. If you look historically at the world, what does any regime, any authoritarian, dictatorial regime do when it's any type of trouble? It launches a war. It's easy to unite the people around it. This isn't like a Russia phenomenon. This is just people in general. The vast majority of people are sheep that are led. I don't mean this in a... Well, it does sound bad, but it is what it is, Most of the people in the world, they're not doers, right? Yeah. They're just stand-byers. Like, oh, the wind blows this way, the wind blows that way. We go with the wind because it's a safe option. And that's what they play on, They know that as soon as you reduce the active percentage of a population to, less than 5%, 3%, you're safe. Nothing else is going to happen because the rest of the people, they might not support you that much, but you don't need them. You just need them to stand by. That's all you need. And that's how it has been historically. And then you sell people an idea. And I think what they've done very successfully is they've taken narratives from the Soviet Union and tropes about the greatness of, Russia, how it's exemplary, how it has its own way, which is super unique. It's not Europe, it's not Asia, it's Russia. It's just on its own. And people buy into that. And as part of that uniqueness, it's us against the world. Look at us. We're the only ones fighting the whole world. Look, America, France, Germany, they're all sending weapons. Look, we're protecting ourselves. And then you have religion that ties into it with Russian Orthodox Church, which supports the president. They're like,
yeah,
like
it's
that.
one and the same, yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
And again, people want to be led to something, and unfortunately, they're led in a very negative direction. Might that change? Yes. Might it change soon? I don't know. I will tell you, my mum, she lived in Moscow, and abroad in the 90s, and she saw massive change in social conscience. There was millions of people. In 91, there was millions of people outside protesting. Where did all those people go? Are they going to come back? Probably. Do the circumstances have to change? Definitely. When's that's going to happen? I don't know.
So the future of Russia, where do you see the future of Russia in like 10, 20 years? Like in order for, in an ideal world, where do you see, what do you see the future is of Russia?
In
future
an
of Russia is?
ideal world,
Yeah, is it balkanized? Is it still Russia, just
in an ideal world,
demilitarized? I don't know. In an ideal world.
well, in an ideal world, there's a change of a regime. You know, there's a democratic regime. Russians go through some kind of re-education course where, you know, the vast majority of the
Do we need to split
population.
up the country though, or does the country need to be split up into?
Why? Well, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think they should just be left alone, but like hopefully they just resolve all their own stuff and they leave the whole world alone. But it's such a difficult process. I don't think it's a 10, 20-year process, you know? Like, you look at Nazi Germany. Even today, there's people in Germany who support those kind of views, right? There's like the AfD. They're pretty far right. How are they getting this many votes? 75, whatever years later, 80 years later. I think it's going to be a very long process in Russia because if you look at yourself and you look in the mirror and you say, I'm a Nazi, or you go and say, hey, actually,
I would never say that.
well,
I'm joking.
or you look at your neighbors and say they're the Nazis. Which one's easier to go with? Obviously, it's easier to say, hey, it's them.
Yeah, of course,
right?
of course.
Anyone is more inclined to do that who doesn't have a particularly high sense of critical conscience, and most people, unfortunately, don't. So, yeah. In an ideal world, there's a democratic government, and you know all the political prisoners are let free. Russia pays reparations to Ukraine, gives Crimea back, you know, gives all the Donbass back, apologizes profusely, and pays their sins for centuries to come.
So basically, it's
But we
like,
don't live in an ideal world.
well, no, it's true. It's true. I just wanted to get your take on what this ideal world would be.
So the last couple of months, I've been in rehabilitation with. I messed up my shoulder pretty bad on a mission, and I just wanted to talk about how mentally difficult it has been for me personally, even though like I still have most of the movements in my arm. But I just realized what the guys with amputations must be going through. Because 6 weeks I walked around with like a cast like this. I couldn't do anything. But I had the mental idea, hey, I'm going to get my arm back. And now I'm restoring the movement. I feel better. I feel stronger. Damn, those young guys who will never have a leg again,
Yeah.
never have an arm again.
And since you brought this up, one of my previous guests, he was saying Ukraine is horrible for disabled people. They don't really have the infrastructure for it.
No.
It's getting better. I can see over the last couple of few years, but it's still not where it needs to be, especially, you know, as this war goes on. There's a lot of disabled people, like you say.
I saw a very sad article in, I think it was the New York Times, about the Ukrainian soldiers who will never see their children because they lost their eyesight during the war. Imagine that. And
Yeah.
a lot of these guys are so young. Yeah, it's really tough. It just like my situation with my injury made me really empathize and understand the amount of mental stress. And I can't even compare what I'm going through to that. It's like no more than 1% in comparison. But it's been challenging for me mentally. And I think, damn, what about those guys? How do they manage it? They're fucking titans, man. Unreal. To be able to losing a limb, losing your eyesight, whatever, and coming back to normal life, obviously with some restrictions, like hats off, man. If somebody could do that, they're a hero. All those guys.
Yeah, I'll tell you like a quick story. So it was about a year and a half ago, like the first winter after the invasion, and I was in Kyiv and it was like blackouts. So it was like just at this bar before I went home, and there was this guy holding a sign, and it was just like a random day. There wasn't like a protest, it was nothing, just but he was like in the bar just like holding the sign, like having a drink. And I was like a couple words on the sign I wasn't familiar with, so I asked him like, you know, Russian, like, what does your sign say? Can you explain it? I don't really understand this. And then he tells me, and so apparently he's like, yeah, my friend he's like, I was in the military. My friend today, he died, and I was so upset, and I didn't know what to do, so I just created a sign. I just wanted to show people, like, it said something about like, you know, Russia is killing us, something like this. I don't remember exactly what it said. And then he was like telling me, he was like getting kind of like emotional because it was like really heartfelt for him, because it was like I don't know, people in the military, I feel like they're very close, you know, especially if you're one group or something like this. It's like, you know, family. And then after we're talking, he like lifts up his pant leg and he's missing a foot, and he just has like some prosthetic like right here, and he can't really walk too well. And it's so sad because he got injured. Apparently it was something, he got injured, foot, leg, lower part of his leg blown off, and then he had to kind of leave. And then like weeks later or a month later, this is when his mate died. And I don't know, it's like so much tragedy.
Yeah, and I think also tragedy and guilt, they all tie into that, because I think a lot of people in society, they'll feel guilty in front of the soldiers for it not being them. It's like subconscious.
Yeah,
You try
survivor's
and
guilt. Yeah,
you try and put on a brave face, but you still feel it. You know, I've had friends who died. I had friends who died on missions where I sent them, and that's something I have to live with.
wow.
It's not an easy thing to live with. You have to make your peace with it because you have to keep living, and there's no other way about it. But it is tough, and I think this is going to be a massive issue in Ukrainian society going forwards. There's so many divisions around that. I mean, you just look at the states after the Vietnam War. Obviously, like you're too young for that, but I'm sure your parents know.
How old do you think I am?
I don't know, 38.
I'm
maybe?
35. Okay.
Ah.
Okay.
Yeah, but so maybe your parents, you know, back in the times of the Vietnam War when those guys came back, you know, they weren't really. I think things are changing now with the U.S. military. You know, since Afghanistan, Iraq, etc., etc. You might not agree with the goals of those wars, but the fact is that those guys need support, and the guys in Ukraine and the women, everyone, they're going to need a massive amount of support going forwards. Is society ready for that here? I'm not sure. Is that a question for today? Maybe not. But you got to plant the seeds of those answers now to hopefully reach.
Well, you had a
good
guest
conclusion.
before. I don't know if you know this guy. He's from Denmark. His name is Michael Colville Anderson. So basically,
Haven't
he's
heard
an
of him.
urban planner, and so he came to Ukraine just to kind of help with the soldiers coming back from war. They're gonna be traumatized mentally. So right now he's doing. I'm gonna do this weekend actually. I'm volunteering some of my time to help with this project. So basically, he's building a therapy garden, like in Podil area or something like this. And yeah, because he wants to have this space, for soldiers to come because they're gonna be traumatized. There's gonna be a lot of people like messed up in the head, PTSD, whatever.
Yeah.
And he's trying to start planting the seeds, if you will, so people can understand how important mental health is and how they can kind of treat themselves, once they come back. Because if you do it after the war's over, it'll be too late. You have to start doing it now so people kind of get adjusted to it. And so every weekend he has volunteers and he goes there as well. And he kind of creates these spaces, for these people to come to that helps them relax their mind.
And also, mental health is so stigmatized. I think
in Ukraine, I feel like
in Ukraine, I mean, in the world in general, there's questions, but obviously, I can say in the UK, situation isn't that bad. People talk. There's psychological support. I think the more east you move, I don't know why. Is it kind of a more masculine mentality?
I was about to say it's like more
stereotype of being a strong man.
Guys have to have strong minds, strong muscles, like all this.
I don't know. Maybe it's something to do with that, but it's definitely not. It's changing in Ukraine. I can see it a lot. There's a lot of support, and I think people talking about it really helps. In general, sharing their experience and saying, "Hey, it's okay to struggle sometimes. We all struggle." But a lot of these guys, women in the military, they're going to come back to their families, and it's going to be very difficult because their families see them as that guy who left 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever. When they come back, it's not the same person.
Yeah.
Whereas the expectations are of that person who was. How do you help society adjust? How do you help those people to reconcile? I don't know. It's a big issue.
Well, it's going to be like a huge issue, like at the end of the war, I think. And also they need to like I told you before, they need to update their infrastructure here because it's not good at all for if you're an invalid.
And even like, you have to understand, these guys are all doing something worthwhile and important. They might have issues, they might have, shitty commanders, whatever, but they know they're part of something that's bigger than them, that gives them a purpose. They might not always want to do it, but they're doing it.
Yeah.
Then they come back. Who are they now? You go from hero to zero. Like, I myself find myself struggling. Like, what do? I go to like PT 5 times a week. Outside of that, what do I do in like civilian life? I'm so kind of accustomed to a different lifestyle that it's difficult for me always to kind of fit in. And like, I would say I'm doing like fundamentally way better than a lot of those dudes with way more traumatic experience. I can't really even honestly compare, but I can look at that and I can say those guys are going to struggle. You will struggle. What do you do? How do you adapt those guys with those skill sets? Who do they become? Security guards? Because that's what a lot of guys end up as right now. No one really wants to take them, and it's tough.
I mean, you have to. Yeah, I don't know. It's really tough. I can only think of like a handful of countries that really kind of have developed maybe social safety nets and programs for these kind of people. And unfortunately, Ukraine is not on that list of countries I can think of that has this. And after the war, there's going to be so many problems that Ukraine has to solve. Whether it's like rebuilding cities, I don't know, relocating people. I don't know but yeah, it's
Well,
going to
that's
be
a
like
question
a big
for
mess.
another day. Thankfully,
Yeah.
well, not thankfully, we kind of got our hands full as it is.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you have anything else to say? Maybe I can. Yeah,
I think that's about it.
At time. So I'll tell you what, Iggy. Why don't you plug your socials, or if you have any kind of charities or anything you want to plug here, look at that camera and yeah.
But yeah, guys, well, if you're interested in following my work and what I do in Ukraine, follow me on Instagram. It's my last name @ivlefyork. And also I want to mention my friends at Pulse. These guys, they're a charity that's trained more than 27,000 soldiers in Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. They've been active since 2014 as well. They do amazing projects. They train everyone for free, all the military. They have a program for civilians as well. Now they're doing these blood transfusions. So if you're looking for someone to support, Pulse are pretty cool. And yeah, help Ukraine, because in the end, you're helping yourself.
And,
you don't want to be fighting out here. You don't want to be fighting anyone.
No, we don't want you to fight either, man. But it's what you need to do for the country, right?
Yeah, everyone does their bit, in a sense. Well, does everyone do their bit?
Some more than others, I'll say.
It's ambiguous.
Yeah, but okay, so that's
one thing I did want to add.
Yeah,
I can just say about myself personally, it's been a massive honor and a privilege to be in Ukraine and to have a positive impact on people around me and on the situation. Like, I really cherish my experiences here. It's been, I want to say it's been incredible. It hasn't been incredible because that's too positive a word, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have helped these people. I'm not grateful for this opportunity to have arisen in my life because it comes with a lot of people suffering, but I'm very lucky to have been able to help people. And it's unfortunate with my injury, I can't do it right now, but hopefully, we get back to doing good work and helping people around us and just moving this world in a positive direction.
Well, the country, and I'm sure the people that you helped out, very grateful, man. Like I just met you, and what you're doing is so much more than I can ever do, man. It requires a lot of courageousness, bravery, and you have all of these, man. So continue to do what you're doing. Like you're one of the people that makes Ukraine a better place. So just keep it up, man.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
But I think everyone can do it if you just show some kindness to people around you, a bit of humanity at the end of the day. It goes a long way. Small things in everyday lives, not necessarily even in Ukraine. I think it helps if we just try to be a positive change on the world around us. We become better people ourselves, and the world becomes a better place.
Totally, man.
So maybe I'm not so cynical after all, right?
Yeah, I mean, you started off cynical, but now things are getting a lot better, man. Yeah. The sun's coming out.
It's not all dark.
Exactly, man. But anyways, thanks for watching this episode of the podcast, Expats in Ukraine. If you like this episode, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment if you want to chit chat with us. And be sure to follow Iggy on his social media as well as Pulse. Support that, and we'll leave like a little link below if Iggy provides us with one. Sure. So anyways, if you want to follow me, Corey.ua on all social medias. Thanks for the cast. Thank you, Iggy, for coming out. And what I like to do at the end of the cast is shake your hands.
Sure.
Thanks for having me. All right, thanks for coming out, man. It's been a pleasure. Cheers, man.